relevant in our conversation, I told her that, usually it's like quite a pleasant process for me to prepare a shir or to prepare a topic. And this time it's hard, this topic, because, from where do you start? And I really don't want it to be just a lecture. I want it to be more interactive. So I think what we'll do is allow Ashgacha Pratis to lead us. I will bring up a few points that came up in my mind, and then that will be an opening, hopefully, for a further discussion in which you should be more involved, so we can gear it to the here and now. So first of all, I can share with you that I have been dealing with counseling people for many years. At this point, I can really say many years. They went very fast. But what I see and what becomes very clear, also in psychology itself, that since one of the basic premises of psychology, of brius hanefesh, of a healthy inner being, mental well-being, is always associated with the ability of the soul, of the nefesh, to be fully and authentically expressed without being suppressed or violated in any way. Okay, everybody agrees to that. So more and more the schools of thought in psychology realized and are realizing that you cannot separate psychology from spirituality. Because the soul is not just a combination of chemicals in the body, as the science wants to limit to that, and psychology began also as a science in some ways, the modern psychology, but everyone had to admit that there is a soul, and the soul is a spiritual entity. And as such, you can't separate between psychology and spirituality. Now, when we say spirituality, we can differentiate between spirituality and divinity, or godliness, or kedusha, anything that is connected to God. So, there is a difference, and in psychology as well, there is a difference. And there are many spiritual principles that are well known in the contemporary spiritual world as well as the world of psychology. For instance, I'll give you an example. And this is not a coincidence example, not a mikre. Psychology is aware of the power of thought, machshava. And in the spiritual world as well, not only in the Jewish world, but in the non-Jewish spiritual world as well, machshava is thought. The power of thought is very much a subject of attention. We are now just began today, in Good Chodesh to everyone, the month of Shvat. And the month of Shvat, one of the first associations, in addition to the Lubavitch association of the Rebbe, Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph Shvat, and so on, Hab Shvat, but the general Jewish meditation, one of the first things that comes up that Shvat is the union of a tree. Rosh Hashanah La'ilanos, Adam Eitz HaSadeh, the Rebbe so many times spoke about it. That the person is like, as it says in the Torah, that Adam Eitz HaSadeh. Person is compared to Eitz HaSadeh, the tree of the field. And Eitz HaSadeh is Gematria 474, which is the same Gematria as Das. Which means, I'm talking with association, and I'll come back to the example of a spiritual knowledge that doesn't have to be necessarily godly. And soon I'll tie it all together. So, Shvat is really, the Chazal please remind me, Adasa, if I get lost, to come back to the differentiation between the example of a spiritual understanding that doesn't have to be necessarily divine, okay? So help me to come back to that. But we are now beginning the month of Shvat, which Chazal say that Shvat, even though the inner world of a Jew is above the zodiac constellations, doesn't have to be subjected to the energy effect of the zodiac. Nevertheless, if there's anything that by birth we are associated with, is this month, the month of Shvat. That's Betulda, this is the month of the Jewish people. And that's why Yisro, when his daughters came back from the well and they told Yisro, who was a very spiritual person, about the fact that the Ish Mitzri Tzilanu, that the Egyptian man saved us. Vegam dalo dala lanu, and he drew the buckets of water for us, Milashon Zli. He drew the water for us. Then Yisro right away complained, how was the passage goes, Lama lo hebeisi mesaish, Lama lo karasi mesaish. Why didn't you bring the man here? And the Ish is Gematria Shvat. He realized right away that it wasn't an Egyptian man, it was a Jewish man. Dalo dalalanu, the Dli. So we are the month of Shvat, the Dli, which is the bucket, is the symbol, which in the holy tongue it wouldn't be called Dli, it would be called Kad. But the spiritual energy of the month of Shvat, the month of the Jewish people, of the psychology of the Jewish people, is that we are people of service. We are like the Dli. The Dli and Dli is a kli, is a vessel that meshamesh el mind, that serves water. The bucket serves to draw water from depth and bringing up to the surface and disseminate it. That's the job of a Jew in this world. Why am I saying all that? Because the Shvat is the symbol, the spiritual, the letter that governs, of the alphabet that governs the month of Shvat is the letter Tzadik. And Tzadik is the perfect man, is the complete image, the wholesome psychology of a human being epitomized by a Jew. And that's the image of a tzaddik, of a person who is wholesome, who is carrying a perfect well-being. That's the image, the human image, the psychological image, and the spiritual image of the month of Shvat, which the letter tzaddik, which means a righteous person, a wholesome person, is Gematria 90, which is the same Gematria as Melech, king. And we know that king, Melech, is a Rashi Tevus, as Chassidus teaches us, of Moach, Lev, and Kaved. The area of the brain, the mind, the heart, and the instinctive area, the liver. These are the three areas of the psychology of a Jew, of every human being. Now we can see how to use some of the points of the time that we are living with, the way Chassidus illuminates it, to also process these topics that we are looking at now. That we are looking at what would look like a wholesome person who is, as the topic tonight, my mental health journey. What is mental health? How you define mental health? So the month of Shvat projects the image of the perfect tzaddik, of the righteous person. Ba'amech kulam tzaddikim, the Rebbe always says, we all are tzaddikim in becoming, in the process. We are potential tzaddikim. So the perfect interaction between that makes a person in a brings a person to a category of a king psychologically, of a total governing over oneself, a conscious person, the gematria das, Eitz Hasadeh, a person who is constantly growing like a tree and develops more and more muda'ut, more das, more consciousness and awareness. That's the perfect Jew. So, why am I saying all this? Because this work of maintaining briut hanefesh, of a spiritual well-being or mental health journey, whatever you call it, always requires, first of all, a clear das, a awareness and consciousness that is all-encompassing. And Chassidus definitely provides that. Now, going back to our first point, that you cannot differentiate between that being that psychology acknowledges that the well-being of a person depends on the ability of a person to express themselves authentically, and since the spiritual aspect, as well as the relationship between the soul, each person, and the Creator, that is not only one department of the soul of a human being, and not only Jewish. In the Jewish soul, it's even more distinctive, and there is some extra dimensions in its connection with God. But every human soul has a core in it, this is about its relationship with God. Now, you can ignore it, but this will not be a full expression of the soul, and therefore would not be sufficient contribution to well-being, to mental health. So mental health has to include spiritual understanding as well as divine understanding, which is all-inclusive. And the difference that I began in the beginning with is to give an example. That's okay, you are dismissed, Hadassah, you don't have to remind me anymore. About the relation that we have with our thoughts. That Chassidus also, of course, brings up a lot of conversations about it. And by the way, one of my thoughts tonight was just to go with you through the first basic prakim, at least 18, 19. We are now in the 19th prakim of the Tanya, because in my mind, one of the ways to view the Tanya is as a real detailed textbook for mental health. Starting with educating us how we are constructed internally, from A to Z, and then all the choices we have, the inner struggles we have, the outcome of different choices, the meditations that we need to arrange in order to accomplish certain emotional accomplishments and others. It's a real detailed textbook. The only thing is that, okay, Hadassah, you have to bring me back to that exercise of the thought, talking about the thought. I mentioned that to you also this afternoon, that it reminds me of, when these thoughts came up to look at the Tanya, how it is an incredible textbook for a mental health guide. Few comments that I got from people I brought up the subject was, you have to be careful. The Tanya is so chewed by people or something that when you start doing that, you might lose them. So it reminds me of this complaint that someone came over in a shul to Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz in Yerushalayim, alav shalom, a big giant that just made a transition. And he said every day the same nusach hatfilah, and we are all, this is real for us. This is real. Every day the same nusach hatfilah. You say the same thing over and over again, and some of them 3 times a day. So it is like really boring. It's like how many, again and again and again. So how do you deal with this? So he said, yes, if the same person that you were yesterday is the person that is reading the Nusach HaTfilah today, then Take, it is boring because it's the same Nusach HaTfilah. But if the person who is davening the Nusach HaTfilah, which was carefully orchestrated by our holy gifted Chazal that included a lot there, if you are the same person and you didn't change from yesterday to today, then for sure the text would be boring, but not because the text doesn't have what you need in order to take off in davening and connect with Hashem. It's rather that you are the boring one, because, and it's not, he wasn't criticizing him, you are the one that is not growing. And therefore, for you, it looks the same. But if you are alive and you are growing and you are thriving, then every day Nusach HaTfilah will be alive with a different energy and a different experience, an eternal experience. And the same thing with Tanya, and the same thing with Chassidus. The truth is that Chassidus, which lechatchila focuses on the pnimius of things, and one of the major spiritual rule is that when you want to unify and reconcile and resolve conflicts and different powers that are playing on the stage of human psychology, the deeper, the higher you go, the more you reconcile. It's like Michael, Sar Shel Mayim, and Gabriel, the officer of water, and they always find the two ministers of the king. But when your king walks in, the minister of economy and the minister of the army, one wants to hold the money, one wants to spend the money, and they're always in friction between them. And the king walks in, who is a higher authority that they're both battled to, they are both completely cooperating in harmony in order to fulfill his will. And so too, since Chassidus gives us the innermost perspective on our reality, you can expect to be able to have an all-inclusive perspective that helps you to reconcile and resolve conflicting powers within yourself. Now, we do have to distinguish between spiritual and divine, which an example of spiritual awareness is a basic awareness that we all need to have which is a basic necessary ingredient in our journey of mental well-being, which never ends, always can be deeper and higher and more wholesome, is to understand, first of all, the nature of thought, and to understand our relationship with thought, which Chassidus explains as we know that thought is a levush, is a garment. But it is thought that through which we process and perceive everything. And thought has a very, very powerful suction. It has an intense suction power. It has a very strong power to draw ourselves into it. And what we call to identify with our thinking. And this is known to spiritual people even if they're not religious. I don't like this word. So one thing to know is that as a Adam Etz HaSadeh, a conscious person, the necessity to know that Machshava, and Chassidus explained this much deeper, since it's the end of the process of bringing something into one's consciousness from the recesses of your soul all the way to the front burner of your consciousness, then Machshava is very, very powerful. It's another time to explain why. But it really has a enormous power on all the organs in the body without any difference. The Machshava is all over, is a ruler, so we need to understand the spiritual impact of being a person who is aware and conscious by defining your relationship with your thinking. Because it's your thinking that creates, it's our thinking that our thought that creates our emotional experience and creates the mood in which we live. Now, thought and logical mind is one of the most powerful tools of what Chassidus calls the Nefesh HaBahamis, or the psychology calls the ego. So, how does the ego get hold of us? It gets hold of us by bringing up in our mind a thought that will be strong enough to cause us, so to speak, strong enough, tempting enough to cause us to identify with it, which means to entangle our sense of self with this thought. So many times we are making up thoughts and then we believe them as if they are the truth because we identify with them. We entangle, we associate our sense of self with these thoughts. So spiritual people know it, and therefore many times you will find that when you are guided to, let's say, advise to do a meditation in the morning, it's a very common thing, because contemporary psychology understands the needs of the soul as a spiritual entity. You see it by Carl Jung, a lot of influence of the Eastern spirituality on the modern Western psychology. So it is known that if you want to connect with your inner self and to be connected with your true self in a deeper way, there are times that it is very advisable to bring more stillness into your being and to slow down and quiet your thinking. Because even psychology knows already that the thoughts are not the self. So that's a spiritual knowledge. But then comes also Chassidus and Torah and goes all the way to describe the core of all this. And the core is where the soul meets its creator. That is by a Goy or by a Jew. It doesn't matter. And by a Jew it has a different dimensions. But in the core of every psychology, of every soul, there is that connection to Hashem. And to exclude that, and to exclude all the knowledge that goes along with that, to understand the psychology of the soul from that perspective as well, to exclude that, that is not conducive for the mental health of a human being, because it excludes a aspect of the soul which is it's really significant and it's really its core. Now, let's look a little bit. There's two sources that came up here, and one is there's a Sefer HaLikutim from the Tzemach Tzedek, which is a kind of encyclopedic view on different subjects from the Hasidic view. Not all the Rebbeim, because it went up to the Tzemach Tzedek. Cholai Haguf VaNefesh, how the Tzemach Tzedek defines Machala. The Tzemach Tzedek talks about mental health and spiritual health. So he looks at the term machala. Machala means illness, the absence of well-being. And he calls it makor hakolel kol minei choli. It is the source that includes all kinds of illnesses. Aderech ma'amar Hazal, the Chachamim say that the apei gimel minei cholayim tluyim b'mara keminyan machala. There are 83 types of illnesses that are stemming from not a good condition of the gallbladder, the mara, and bichlal, the end stage of digestion. V'chulam pas shacharit mebataltan. And all of them, if you're careful to eat pas shacharis, the morning meal, the right morning meal, that can annul them. Okay, I'm not getting into the physiological aspect of it. That will be another expert. But there are a lot of illnesses that come in connection to the digestion and the gallbladder. And we know that it's connected also to the ability to control anger and the ability to experience laughter. The mara is connected with the level of vitality and optimism in a person. There is mara lebana, mara shchora. A person who is mara shchora, a person who is black blood is more like depressed person. A person bal mara levana is a person who is more upbeat, optimistic person, and so on. And there is a health discussion here, but we will focus on the spiritual aspect. So אם כן, החולאים הללו יש להם מקור ממה שמסהבים, והוא הפסולת שמהמרה חולו. So that means that those sicknesses have a source that creates them, and that's the waste from the gallbladder or from the bladder. וזהו הפסולת נקרא מחלה. And this toxic aspect, the waste of the process of internalizing the food and the fluids in the body, when we have a negative psolus, this waste, these toxins, that is not processed properly, that is called machala, the illness. Vehu haklal hakolelam, and this is the general rule that includes them all. Ufatehem nikra choli, and the different details are the different illnesses. וידוע שתחלואי הנפש הם נמשלים לתחלואי הגוף שווה בשווה. And it's known that the illnesses of the soul are compared to the illnesses of the body. They are corresponding to each other. וכמו שכתוב בתיקונים, תיקון כ"ה, דשכינתא היא מרה בגלוסה. As it says in the תיקונים, in the Zohar, that the Shechinta is considered ill in Galus. The Shechinta is not functioning well, is in an ill condition. It's not being able to reveal itself and to be absorbed. The Shekhinah means the divine vitality and divine life force that creates us is completely not integrated and not revealed to us. And it's not part of our normal consciousness. And therefore, the Shekhinah is not operating, not circulating like the health of a person that very much so depends on the blood circulation in the body. If the Shekhinah of that aspect of Elokus that recreates our reality all the time is not flowing in our consciousness, if the Shekhinah is in a sick condition. We are a manifestation of the Shekhinah, the human manifestation. A Jewish person is a human manifestation of the divine power that creates this reality, this world. So the Zohar says that the ultimate spiritual illness is that the Shekhinah is in Galus. What do I mean the Shekhinah is the Galus? The Shekhinah is Malchus of Atzilus, the source of all Jewish souls that are about to descend into bodies. But the way the Malchus of Atzilus nurtures our world is through a tremendous symptom. It's like a big curtain that creates a schizophrenic existence in our being. We have an external being, which is called the Nefesh HaBahamis, the ego, what we call I. And we have the internal being, the godly soul, that is constantly connected to the universal consciousness and to divinity. And they are in essence connected. My outer soul my outer self and my inner self are connected. My ego and my soul are connected, but I don't experience that. I experience a separation in which my sense of self, my ego, my sense of my identity feels separate from the world, and feels like an entity also separate from its source. And as such, that's the source of many illnesses. דהיינו, says the Rebbe, בחינת חולי הנפש שבזמן שבית המקדש היה קיים. What is חולי הנפש? What is the illness, the psychological, spiritual illness of the soul? Is at the time שבית המקדש existed, שהיו ישראל במעלה העליונה, that the Jewish consciousness was on a higher level, בחינת פנים בפנים עם הקדוש ברוך הוא, face to face with godliness, the divine energy that creates us and is constantly bringing us into existence, and the divine consciousness that operates through our minds that we're not aware of. להיות כל חפצם ותשוקתם להשם. They were in a mental state that their sole interest and desire was in divinity, to be connected with their maker. And zehu briut hanefesh. This is the well-being of the soul, says the Tzemach Tzedek. The fact that I went to this and this school, and I learned Chassidus already, and I wasn't touched by Chassidus, or wasn't illuminated, or wasn't enlightened, or wasn't clarified by Chassidus, or didn't resolve my confusions or my lack of understandings because of the way I processed it, or because I didn't have the best teacher, or because I was not zoche to have a mashpia that resolved that conflict in himself or in herself. That doesn't mean that, as Rabbi Steinsaltz Alav Shalom said to the searching Jew, that doesn't mean that the nusach, the script, is missing anything. Mashe'en kenata bagalus. This is not the case now, when we are in an exiled condition, which means our consciousness is in a state of fragmentation. We don't have a oneness in our understanding of reality. We are looking at this part and that part, and we're finding it hard to make sense of all of it, and to feel the oneness, and to feel the perfect wisdom that runs through all the different pieces of our lives. Today I was speaking to someone who called me, and I told her I'm going to speak to some young women about the role of Chassidus in mental health. How would you define mental health? And she said to me, she said various things, but the first thing she said is that she defines mental health as the ability to be totally in peace with what is. So, in any case, the Rebbe, let's just finish here, that the Rebbe says that mental health is that your sole interest, your main interest, is in divinity, which is not the case now, Begalus, when the consciousness of human being is exiled, in an exiled condition, is not connected with the universal wisdom, with the divine wisdom that is the truth of our reality. And you see the craziness that is happening as a result of it all around us. Asher nazoru achor, people regressed, ki panu elai oref, because they turn their oref to me, their back, the back of the neck to me, their back to me, says Hashem. Paro is osios oref, the back of the neck. Va'pnimius, meaning that only an external aspect of our consciousness is invested, and our awareness is invested in divine matters, in holy matters, in our relationship with God and the relationship with our reality and God. The externality of our awareness, v'apnimius, but the real interest is melubash b'taivos ha'olam, is invested in all the pulls and the seductions of the world, including politics and including food, and including, by the way, this month of Shvat, the Melech, the ruler over the mind, over the heart, and the liver, which will still connect, if we have enough time, to the Parsha. How do you work on yourself to make yourself healthy? It says in the Arizal, it says in Kabbalah that every month has a function, a psychological function, and a body function that is waiting to be elevated and refined and clarified. And the function that is associated with the tzaddik, with the perfect the superman, the superhuman being, the function that is elevated in connection to a healthy human being is the function of akhila, of eating. That the tzaddik ochel lesova nafsho. That the way you process eating, the way you relate to eating, it's very similar to the way you relate to thinking. It's the way you integrate food. You integrate spiritual food to your thought. So do you lose yourself in your eating? And do you lose yourself in your thinking? Or you use your eating for satiating your soul? Tzadik ochel lesova nafsho. Do you use your mind for the sake of your soul? I heard once a very good definition. Someone said that the mind, which is a very strong faculty of the ego, as well as the soul, but the main faculty of the ego, is a very good servant, but it's a very bad master. So we need to be the master of the way we process things and what we identify with and what not. So too with eating. In any case, the Rebbe continues, I want to make it shorter here. And the Rebbe continues and to say that it's only the external aspect of the awareness of the person that is invested in the relationship with God, and the internal interest is mainly invested in the different taivos, in the different addictions or pulls and powers of the world, that is called choli hanefesh, the illnesses of the soul. And just as there are many illnesses in the body, so too in the nefesh. And just as there is a source that causes illnesses in the body, and it's called machala, the lack of well-being, so too in the nefesh. It is the ra, the ungodly, the negativity of the nefesh habahamis, the negativity of our ego, which is the source of all kinds of choli hanefesh, of psychological illnesses. And the Rebbe continues and gives an example of tzaras, where there is a lack of blood flow in certain areas of the skin, and so too the lack of the spiritual blood flow of the soul. There is a spiritual tzaras as well, and that is when someone is desiring something that doesn't belong to him, is not really a reflection of his true self. And the Rebbe specifies all kinds of illnesses. There is an illnesses of coldness. This was an example of hot. There are illnesses of coldness and laziness. A person does not get moved by any deep idea. And so too the Acholaim, the last line of the page, She'en Baim Sakana v'choli sheyesh bo sakana, the two abbreviations. There are mental illnesses that are dangerous illnesses to our whole well-being, and there are illnesses that are not that threatening to our whole well-being, and there are illnesses sheyesh baim sakana that are a threat to our entire well-being. And so too in the nefesh. When the nefesh is, next page, the two last lines are the next page already. When the nefesh is engaged in ungodly subjects for no godly purposes, for no purposes that are connected to who the person is, And when I talk about the relationship with God, one of the outcomes, of the negative outcomes of this split between the reality of Atzilus and the reality of our world, between Atzilus and Biyah, this curtain that separates between the divine perspective and human perspective, a world perspective. Bottom line, the Rebbe concludes that there is a choli she'ein bo sakana, there is a choli she'yesh bo sakana, but when we have a split between the divine perspective and the world perspective, then it happens that our interest and the nefesh is schlepped into being invested in areas of addictions. And addiction means, it doesn't mean only if you take a substance or not. That's just the physical outcome of it. But the addiction begins with losing the self of self, the independent self of self, when we identify with ways of thinking that are not truthful, that are distorted. And that creates suffering. And that leads me to the end of this part of this discussion. So why do you need Chassidus? Because there is not, I don't have, of course this is can be at times very, very useful to explore all kinds of psychological methods and types of therapies and tools to deal with all kinds of illnesses or struggles or challenges that we have with our nefesh. But it all has to be governed under the umbrella of the view of Chassidus. Why? Because if you don't have that deepest and all-inclusive view, you might lose the right perspective when you are defining your psychological values. And then you might get confused. For instance, what is a healthy guilt and what is unhealthy guilt? Guilt could be a terrible destructive power of the ego and can keep a person away from being self-expressed. And on the other hand, guilt could be a very good spiritual alarm system that keeps you from deviating from the truth and from your connection with God. And so too with self-care and self-love, which is a very common topic, contemporary topic of this generation, how much we need to have self-love, because this generation is suffering from an absence of it. And major reason why we suffer from absence of it is because we are disconnected from Or and Sof, from godliness. Because the moment you are connected with godliness, you feel love, and you are in love and you feel loved. So we have all kinds of addictions instead. So we need to define what's a true love and what is not a true love. What is a true self-care and true self-nurturing, and what is self-indulgence? And what I was touching on before is this curtain between the divine perspective and the world perspective is creating that split between the inner self of a person that comes along with being aligned with the shlichus of the person in the world, and the talents and the moods and the joy and the thought, speech and action kind of activities. And the way to integrate all of it in the healthiest way is with the light of Chassidus, because Chassidus transcends just the structure of logic and what makes sense to us, and really opens up the door to the Chochmah Shebanefesh, to the place in your soul that is sensitive to infinity and to absolute truth, that transcends the limitations of this world. And therefore, the combination of the knowledge of the tools of psychology and governed with the perspective and the supervision of the Hashkafa of Chassidus, that's a sure way to make sure that we are experiencing a very joyful, healthy, vibrant, colorful journey of mental health. I just want to conclude with, you see in the Chassidus Shalom, I'm not going to read inside because I want to leave some time for you to ask questions or to make comments or to interject, and we can have a discussion. But the Chassidus Shalom brings from the Maharal, so before this page, it's a Chassidus Sefer that brings the Hasidic view, not Dafka Chabad, on the Parshios and different subjects. And he brings the Maharal Prague of, the Rebbe comes from his family, of Dvuros Hashem, that in Yetzias Mitzrayim, Hashem didn't have in mind only that generation, rather he had in mind all generations, including ourselves, Ad Sof Kol HaDoros. And therefore the Torah is elaborating so as much at length about the 10 Makkos and so on. In Torah Or you can see how the prelude to all the 10 Makkos was that Moshe was throwing this staff, the stick, in front of Paro and turning the mateh into a snake, and then the snake back to a mateh, and the mateh of Aaron ate all the sticks of the magicians of Paro. A whole spiritual conversation there that was very intense, in which Moshe Rabbeinu is making clear to Paro that the entire Seder Ishtashlus, whether it is within a human being, in the consciousness of human being, or the entire Seder of the reality of the world, which is represented by this mateh, which is a miraculous thing, this mateh, with which all those amazing miracles took place. This mateh, which represents the entire order of Ishtashelus, becomes a nachash and goes back to become a mateh, which means that everything, even all the way to the level of nachash, as Paro was symbolized by the big snake that lies in the Niles, in the rivers of the Niles, who says, I am the master of any worship, and I am God myself. I made myself. That's what the ego feels. I am here of myself, and I am generating my perception of myself. In any case, the process of the 10 Makkos was really to crush this consciousness of Klippa, which feels separate, and which views the world and nature separate from the Creator, from the oneness. And connected that with this miraculous mateh, that the staff, the stick that the Zohar said that was created Ben Hashmashos Erev Shabbos, the first Shabbos of Bereshis, Erev Shabbos, Ben Hashmashos twilight. A lot can be said about that, and it has the holy name of Hashem engraved on it. And then, as we say in the Seder, the abbreviation of the 10 Makkos, Datzach, Adash, Ba'achab. And the Chassidus Shalom says that why the Torah specifies all these 10 Makkos and divides them to 2, because it really represents the consciousness of a human being. The first 3 Makkos are the Makkos from in the ground and under the ground, the Dam, the Tzfardea, and so on. The second group of Makkos are the Shneim, the Tachtim and the Shneim. The second group is the over the earth, with the Arov and so on, the animals and so on, over the earth. That represents the second level of consciousness, that's the emotions of a person. And the first, the Shlishim, the top Makkos, that were Neteya, Matchal, Hashamayim, that were like Barad, like the Hail or Choshech, they were in the sky. They were already in the Chabad area, in the consciousness area of a human being. And then Chassidus Shalom says, you want to be a healthy person, then you want to go through a process of refinement of your ego that is composed out of these 10 powers, and make sure that they are aligned with your inner self, with your divine self. And what I was saying before was that the divine self is needs to be integrated with the outer self. And that brings a healthy person. So the way to do it, says the Nesivos Shalom, is that you begin, the usual order is that you begin with the first three, which represents the Nehim, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, the more instinctive aspects of your being. That means your behavior. That you begin by learning how to master your behavior, meaning thought, speech, and action. And mainly thought. When you are developing the right relationship with your thought, when you don't identify with every thought, you identify only with those thoughts that reflect who your soul is, who you are. And one of the problems of the split between Atzilus and our reality is that we don't recognize who we are. That we feel that God is outside of us. God is outside of me, and now I have to subdue or to subject or to connect with Him. But the truth is that God is inside me. And therefore, the spiritual aspect of aligning my ego with my inner soul, with my godly soul, is part of B'rius HaNefesh, is part of mental health, because it is an intrinsic part of me, of who I am. Not just relating to something outside of myself. In any case, the Seder that Nesivos Shalom suggests is to go milemata lemaila, that first you deal with your nehi, which means your addictions, your thoughts, you make sure that your thoughts, your conversations, and your actions are not addiction kinds of behavior. They are generated from your true self, from your vision and from your sense of alignment for what you are here for. And then you go up to the second set of makos, of elevating the second dimension of human psychology. That's the midos, the emotions. That the emotions are not reactive emotions, rather they are illuminated by your choices, by your vision, by your values. And therefore, from that you manage midas hakas, all the negative, as the Tzemach Tzedek we read here, that the negative aspects, all these negative elements of the midos of Nefesh HaBahamis have to be processed through the consciousness of the third aspect of the powers of the soul, which is the mind, which is the consciousness of the person. And when a person comes to Shamayim, the first thing that we are asked is nasata v'natata be'emuna. As I shared with you, Hadassah, today. That means literally people understand it as the first thing you ask when you come to be facing truth. When you come to be judged for who you truly are. When you face yourself. That moment of truth. The first thing you are asked is nasata v'natata be'emuna. Meaning, literally, how did you deal with your businesses? How did you deal with things? Where did you keep your integrity? Were you an honest person? But the Hasidic look at this is nasata v'natata be'emuna, which means how did you deal with your emuna? That's the first question a person is asked. Did you deal with emuna? How did you deal with things the principles your principles of faith, what you believe in, your ideas, your principles, your values, your mission, what you are aligned with, what you believe in, what you represent in this world, what your life is about. Nasata v'natata ba'emuna, did you deal with your faith and your values and your vision of who you are and who you want to be, like you deal with your business, nasata v'natata? When I own a business, I make sure that I work on it and I expand it and I improve it and I make it more profitable. I never stop thinking about my business, how to make it better and better and better. Did you deal with your emuna, we are asked? Did I deal with my emuna the way I run my business? It's my business that I care about. So this is the regular way. We have to begin with gaining control over our behavior through refining our emotions, and all this has to be governed by the Chabad, and even beyond Chabad, Kachab, the Keser as well. And then the Rebbe concludes, here in the Sibos Shalom he concludes, this is the normal way. But there are times where we experience breakthrough. And we experience like a quantum leap in our psychology, and by this I'm stopping for now. And that is where there are times that we are illuminated with an insight that comes from our truth, from our soul, from our inner self, from our neshama, that really, as the Rebbe said, Yesh hakoneh olamo b'sha'a echat. There is a person who can acquire a whole olam ha'aba in one sha'ah. So usually people say 1 sha'ah, 1 hour of good deeds, the mitzvahs, good deeds in this world is the whole olam haba, more than all olam haba. But the Rebbe says sha'ah means a care, means a turn. El kain min chasod lo sha'ah. Hashem didn't turn to Kain's sacrifice. So sha'ah, yesh hakoneh olamo b'sha'ah achat. Sometimes we can acquire a tremendous amount of well-being and mental health after one insight, one turn that happens in our consciousness that lifts us up, like Moshe Rabbeinu was told, Harem et matcha, pick up your mateh, pick up your consciousness to a higher level where you can experience well-being in a completely different way and more all-inclusive way. So these are the ideas that came up in my mind, and please, you're welcome to make comments or ask questions or make it more directed to more practical applications. Why does addiction not represent your true self? What is the feeling what is the experience that we pursue when we are practicing an addictive behavior, whether it is drugs or alcohol or food or sex or biting our nails or I don't know, everybody has their own, we all have our own mishigassen, right? So some are angry, addicted to anger. What is the experience that we are looking for when we operate in an addictive mode? Pleasure. I wouldn't, maybe escaping suffering of the self. Balance. We're looking for balance, okay? I think one of the problems with addictions is that we are looking at the object of our escaping painful emotions. Yes, okay. That we are looking at the object of our addiction as the source that provides this experience. So if someone drinks alcohol, so there is a belief that the alcohol provides the experience of pleasure, of freedom, or relief from suffering. The problem with it is that it's not the substance that provides that experience. It's connection to the etzem hanefesh, to your inner soul, that provides you this experience. Which means that all these experiences that we are really pursuing when we generate an addictive behavior, all these experiences really are experiences that we do experience when we are connected with our neshama, with our soul, with our inner self. The power of pleasure is the power in the soul. It's not in the wine or in the drugs. The drugs just enable us to, or at times, and after a short time that stops doing that, for obvious reason, is that it enables us at times to either to quiet down our thinking, or to numb our pain, And when we numb our pain and quiet down our thinking, then the light of the neshama can shine, becomes more apparent and shines more. And then these are natural qualities of the neshama, the power of pleasure, the power of joy, the power of peace. Being aligned with Hashgacha Pratis and totally in tranquility with what is, out of trust that is the best custom-made situation for me. All these are pleasant experiences of the neshama, with its love, clarity, peacefulness, freedom, power, creativity. All these qualities are qualities that we experience, and experiences that we do experience when we get connected to our inner soul, inner self. The problem with addiction is that we attribute that power not to our soul, rather to these substances that we are using in order to soothe ourselves enough so we can allow the soul to utter its voice. So the problem with that is that, first of all, it's a false perception. Any false perception brings to a false result. These are results that are not truthful, because a person gets distracted by the substance of addiction as the source of their experience, and they become, rather than the substance serving him, he is now under the governing of the substance, because, number one, if you believe that the substance provides it, you need more and more, because since it's not, you need to do more in order to subside your frustrations. And it's a downhill process, because it's not a truthful process. The truthful process is that you are in a journey of closing the gap between your outer self and your inner self. This is the split between the Atzilus and Biyah, the split between the divine perspective and the human perspective. The reconciling, the bridging between the two, that's our work. And when we do, nothing can provide more pleasure and joy and light than that. Now the question is, can you achieve all this with Chassidus only? Ultimately, yes. But it's like asking, can you live a healthy life without a doctor? So, yes, if you conduct your life in a way that your nutrition is correct, and your sleeping is correct, and your activities are correct, and your thoughts are correct, and everything, then you don't need a doctor. Now, if there are illnesses already, then it's better to consult with a doctor that knows, that has some tools how to deal with specific illnesses. But if you only deal with symptoms and suppressing them, as the Western medicine at times does, and realizes more and more that it has to integrate the Eastern medicine as well, and even higher than that, when you only deal with the symptoms and not with the real cause of the symptoms, then it's just a way to delay the healing, or it provides temporary healing that sometimes create deeper problems and even larger problems, and more in quantity as well. So at times it is a good idea to consult someone who has more experience how to deal with certain behaviors that are a representation of a malfunctioning that is permeated all the way, went down to and permeated the emotional and the mental daily functioning of a person as well. So a person who has good tools how to deal with such ailments, it's a very good thing to have. But always it has to be connected with the whole picture of the spiritual context of the soul, and the relationship between the soul and the body, and the relationship between the Nefesh HaBahamis and the Nefesh HaElokis, the ego and the divine soul. The question that I saw here is, can someone be, I think the question was, can someone be religious and not spiritual? I think yes. Is it great? No. Because, especially like, how can you be a chassid, which means, how can you be a person who is aware about the inner dimensions of reality if you're not spiritual? Like, if you're not, there has to be a basic education of the spiritual worlds. And the Alter Rebbe says you need to know about the our worlds and not only this world. You have to say how Hashem operates. It's a very necessary to deal with all the factors of life in our generations, and we're exposed to so much. I don't see how a person can be not spiritual by nature, that he doesn't have a special affinity, but every soul is made out of spiritual stuff, and we need that knowledge just for well-being, that there's a basic knowledge that we need for well-being. But you can have a very full, rich relationship with Hashem by, if you are just emotional, even that's nice. I mentioned it to you, Adassa, that I was thinking today, talking about Brius HaNefesh, right? So I happen to teach in my Tanya class to learn now with my friends to learn Mem Dalet, Perek Mem Dalet in Tanya. That talks about different meditation that awaken different love, the type of love that is in every Jewish heart. And one love is the Ava of like a son to his parent. So, when you talk about basic psychology, if you don't want to know, you go in Shidduchim, you ask, did the person grow up in a healthy family? Is the relationship good with the parents? And if not, did he work on it? Is he aware of it? Is he okay? Because that basic love between a father and a child and a mother and a child, it's a basic ingredient of Brius HaNefesh. So if a person, as the Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya, is realizing that our connection, and that's specifically to Jews, that the person relation with Hashem is mamash like a relationship like between a child and a father, a son and a father, that's chelek elokam imal mamash, and therefore, and it's real, and you make it real, you make it real, then next time when you talk to God, you're talking to your tati. And when you make Yiddishkeit real, religion, religious person, not be spiritual. If you make your religion real, and it's a real relationship, and you're not so spiritual, but you are aware that you have a Tata in Shamayim that loves you infinite, and you love him infinitely, to the extent that every Jewish soul is willing to give up its existence for the sake of rescuing the godliness in it, rescuing its father. When you are present to such love, it's healthy. It's like present to your love to your tati if you give you this love. And if you have a great relationship with the Shekhinah, that's like a spiritual, healthy relationship with your mother. So all these are connected. To be completely not spiritual, many people are not spiritual, but there has to be basic spiritual education. And that's why the coming of Mashiach is conditioned by Afatas HaMayanos. It's not stam that the Rebbeim say that this knowledge has to be disseminated, but it has to be brought down to people who by nature are not that spiritual. So it has to be brought down to a psychological, practical, human language that will appeal to a person who is not spiritual as well. And there are many ways to connect to God other than being spiritual. That's in Maisim Tovim, in all kinds of emotional connections, Can you
discuss the role of a relationship with a mashpia or a therapist in the light of Chassidus with regards to mental health?
If you have a good mashpia and you're learning Chassidus and you're taking it seriously, most likely that you don't need more than that. I'm not saying there are exceptions, but that's already when things went not a smooth way. Do you always need therapy? No, you can do without. Sometimes you need someone who will make it more personal for you. Yes. Now, you're talking about the relationship between a mashpia and a...
How does this apply to the idea of psychology that the psychological imbalances in the brain contribute to underlying or underlie certain mental illnesses, this seems to suggest that there can be aspects of mental illness that is not in a person's control, meaning they wouldn't be cured by learning Chassidus or connecting with one's deeper self in traditional ways.
In my practice, I'm thinking right now of one specific person that really is clinically not well, and medications and so on. What keeps them going is not the medications. What keeps them going is their spiritual work. And they are subjected to the effect of the imbalance in the body and so on, and it's not easy to balance, but it's the inner work, the spiritual work, that at times is psychological as well, and at times it's really practical and ma'aser b'pol, but it's the inner overall Hasidic perspective that brings the real healing. Without that, it's too fragmented. Mental health is the ability to be in peace with what is.
So how does that reconcile with us wanting change in the world and not being okay with suffering?
One thing that a capacity that the soul gives a person is a little bit of a door that can open to infinity. In the Chassidus now, he talks about Koach HaChochma, that the power of Chochma that we have is the ability to transcend just logic. Because in logic, it's a little bit like physical space, where one thing sits, you can't put something else. In physical space, where I put one object, I can't put another object. It takes a space. And in mental logic, which is mainly associated with the Sfira Sabina, when one thing sits in a certain mental place, it cannot be occupied by a contradicting fact. Now, this is not the case when you are going to a higher level of consciousness, less finite. You find that two opposite things can be true at the same time. That on one hand, in order to be completely present and functional and clear and creative and powerful and free and effective in the moment is when you totally align with the moment. When you resist the moment, the answer is the answer this woman gave, but it's a good answer because this is really what the alignment with Hashgacha Pratis is. It's being aligned with the fact that everything that is custom-made for you in the moment. Does it mean that you cannot be proactive about things? No. It means that emotionally you should not resist what is in a manner that makes you feel that you are watching a cosmic flow. Everything in that sense is perfect, and at the same time is also perfectly designed for you to put in your 2 pennies, or whatever you need to contribute in the moment. But that means that the only way you can do it in the most perfect way, that it did not waste any energy on resisting and being angry and rejectful of what is, because then you're not clear, you are taken over with resistance and frustration and negative feelings, and most likely your effectiveness will be reduced. So 2 things, when you are in a more expansive consciousness, 2 things can be truthful at the same time. That on one hand, this moment is custom-made for me and it couldn't be better. And I have one of my sons, when he wants to make fun of me, of his spiritual mother, and I have complaints about something that he did or something else did or something happened, he says, "Ma, what happened is the highest order, isn't it?" He makes fun of me. This is the highest order. This is what's supposed to happen now. What are you excited about, right? So there is no contradiction to the fact that on one hand we need to be perfectly aligned and trustful. And it's an active work that is connected to Midas HaNetzach that we are now learning in Basil Legani. That we are completely trusting that everything that is happening is perfectly orchestrated by perfect divine consciousness, moment by moment, and therefore I'm not wasting any soul energy on resisting it and feeling like a victim of it or anything else, or being angry. But at the same time, I'm so clear about my role in this that I will be proactive in terms of how I can add more light and more love, or whatever freedom or clarity or wisdom or oneness or togetherness or whatever good stuff human beings pursue into this situation.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll end up with one last question. Esther, I don't know if you want to explain your question a little more, but she wrote, what about self-love and possible misapplication of Chassidus? I'm not sure what you meant by self-love or how that came in.
Self-love, if somebody asks a mashpia is critical. Somebody to guide you is critical. I remember I was not born in Lubavitch. I was born in a traditional home, but not Hasidic and not in Lubavitch. And I came to Lubavitch, and my first mashpia was a Rav Dunin, alav shalom. He was a special man. And the bond that we created with him and his wife and his family was something that for another conversation. But I remember at a certain point when I took on the path of Chabad and to follow the Rebbe's path, I had to depart and say goodbye to a certain relationship that wasn't conducive to my path. And he was sitting with me, and I began to cry because I realized how painful it will be for me. I'm not a person that cries easily, but tears came up. And I remember the look in his eyes when he was present to my pain, and it was a look that was a little bit similar to when I first walked with my Chaya Mushka, who was was on the call before, Mushki Polak, if she's still here. After the Rebbetzin was Nistalek, and the first time that Lag BaOmer we went with the babies that were called Mushka, or Chaya Mushka, after the Rebbetzin, we were a group of mothers that had babies with Chaya Mushkalach that walked in front of the Rebbe with their strollers with the babies in Lag BaOmer. And I remember I walked into this zone of white light in front of the Rebbe, and I remember the Rebbe's face, and it was like an intense combination of love and pain. Like they said, the Rebbetzin just passed away, and the joy of all this Meidalach, and the pain, So I remember this look of my mashpia that was a mixture of tremendous love and compassion, but strength and power and clarity. And he said to me, I was taught by my mashpia, he said to me, that even when a person cries, he needs to know who is crying, the Nefesh HaBahamis or the Nefesh HaElokis. We need to know who loves. Just as we need to know who cries, we need to know who loves. And that's what Chassidus helps you to get, and Mashpia helps you, to get this clarity to select, because the challenge of this world that is, since we ate from the tree, that it's everything is a combination of right and wrong, good and bad. It's a mixture. And sometimes it's hard to know right from wrong. It's hard to know truth from not truth, the false. And when it comes to self-love, sometimes it's very thin line between the absolute divine instruction and directives to make sure that you never forget yourself and you keep nurturing yourself, beguf or benefesh, and you have to create times where you are spending time with yourself and you are making sure that yourself is addressed in all that it needs. Anything that contributes to health, whether it is sunshine or vitamins or good nutrition or spiritual nutrition and the daily, or whatever you need to, all this needs to be taken care of carefully. But in order to always be on top of the clarity, the discernment between love that is self-based, self-centered based. And self-centered, I don't mean just selfishness. Everybody knows, for that you don't need to be too spiritual or divine even, to know that selfish is not that great. But anything that stems from self, from the perception of self, self-based, selfhood, and that's a common perspective of the ego, and for that it's good to have someone that from time to time you check in and you verify that the person who is not you and that you trust, that loves you a lot and cares about your development, that to run by that person and to check that the self-love is a love that comes from the Nefesh HaElokis. Now, love is, I just read it in a sefer yesterday and known to spiritual people as well, that when you talk about Or and Sof, you don't differentiate between that and love. So when you are in touch with your soul, as I said before, you are in love, and you feel love, and you feel beloved. You love yourself, you love others, you are in love. But you need to distinguish between love that is addictive, love that you get lost in, by expecting that the subject or the objects of your life provides for you a better sense of self. That's addictive. And in order to differentiate, it's good to run it by a person that you share yourself with and cares for you, that will help you to be clear about it.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Ginsburg.